The wind had a way of speaking in the high plains, soft at first, like a hum between fence posts, then rising into a howl that scraped against the bones of the land. It moved through dead grass like it was looking for someone who might listen, but the house on the ridge didn't answer. It stood with its windows shuttered and its porch bowed, a quiet, watchful thing, like the man who lived inside. Silas Wade hadn't spoken to another soul in 3 days. He ate sparingly, worked alone, and sat in the evening with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. His boots were scuffed and cracked, same as the tools that leaned against the wall like old men waiting for purpose. His wife had died 5 winters ago. Cancer, though folks around here only called it the wasting. They didn't need the medical name. They knew what it did. Grief hadn't made Silas cruel, just quieter than most. He wasn't the kind to spit into the dirt or curse the heavens. He just stopped expecting things to get better. Life, he figured, was a long stretch of dry land between storms. So when the wagon appeared on the rise, creaking under the weight of rusted hinges and broken promises, Silas did not rise from his chair. He merely watched it approach, one hand resting lightly on the rifle across his lap, the other wrapped around the cracked ceramic of his cup. The man driving the wagon wore desperation like sweat. His name was Grady Finn, and he smelled like rye whiskey and old shame. His horse limped from a loose shoe. The wheels of the cart groaned as if burdened not by weight, but by the act of carrying something no one wanted to bring. Grady climbed down with a grunt. Silas stood now, slowly, knees stiff from the cold. His eyes flicked to the back of the wagon, where a bundle of cloth moved slightly, too slow to be cargo, too silent to be livestock. "She's mine," Grady said without preamble. "But I can't feed her. Damn girl don't talk, don't listen. Useless as a sunken well." Silas said nothing. The wind blew harder. "I heard you got space," Grady went on. "No wife. No kids. She'll stay out of your way. Ain't like she's got opinions." Still, Silas said nothing. Grady stepped to the wagon bed and yanked back the flap. A girl sat there, knees drawn to her chest, hands balled into fists. She couldn't have been more than 12. Hair like black thread stuck to her face. Bare feet. Eyes, those were the strange part. They were wide, but not with fear. They were listening, watching everything, as if measuring something no one else could see. "She's deaf," Grady spat. "Doctor said so. Ain't never heard a word in her life. Can't teach a creature like that nothing. But I figure maybe you can put her to work. Or keep her fed till she dies. Whatever." Silas still didn't speak, but he reached into his coat, pulled out a small pouch, $5 silver, and a bottle of rye. Grady took both like he was being done a favor. He tipped his hat, which was more a patchwork of dirt than felt, and turned back to his horse without looking at the girl again. She did not move as he left. She just sat there, staring at Silas, as though waiting for him to make a sound he hadn't decided on yet. He stepped forward, held out a hand. She didn't take it, but she climbed down on her own. The porch creaked beneath her feet. She walked like someone who expected pain. Every step tested the world, like it might give way beneath her. Silas opened the door and gestured inside. She hesitated, then passed him like smoke, silent, fast, and untouchable. Inside, the house smelled like wood smoke and horse leather. There was a cot in the corner. Clean. Bare. She took it without asking. He made no effort to speak. No welcome, no instructions. She didn't seem to need them. That night, Silas sat by the fire while the girl lay curled on her side. Her eyes remained open. She didn't cry. Not once. He watched her from the corner of his eye, trying to decide what she was. Not who, but what. A burden? A wound passed off like livestock? Or something else? Something not broken, but hidden. Like a locked box with no key. The wind clawed at the shutters. He rose, checked the latch, then paused by her cot. She was breathing shallowly. Eyes closed now, lashes twitching like a rabbit in dream. A scar peeked from beneath her collarbone. Faint. Not fresh. A thin line like someone had tried to write something on her skin and then stopped mid-sentence. Silas stepped back. Come morning, she was already up, sitting by the corral fence, watching the horses shift in the early haze. He brought her bread and milk. She didn't touch it until he walked away. By noon, she was sweeping the barn. By evening, she had helped mend a fence, no prompting needed. She learned fast, watched everything. Her hands moved when she thought no one was looking, gestures in the air, like words without sound. She touched objects like they might speak if she listened hard enough. Silas began to wonder. That night, he found her in the loft of the barn instead of the cot. She'd built a nest out of hay and blankets. She looked more at home there than she ever had indoors. He didn't disturb her. Days passed. She never spoke, never signed anything when he was watching. But once, while he was fixing a busted saddle strap, he dropped a tool. She bent down and handed it to him before he even turned his head. He looked at her then, really looked, and saw it. Her eyes had moved before the sound had reached her. A test, then. The next day, he stood behind her with a coffee tin and dropped a nail inside. She didn't flinch. He repeated it louder. Still nothing. But that night, he dropped a pan in the kitchen when he knew she was in the next room. She came running. She didn't look panicked, just alert. And in that moment he knew. She heard. Maybe not everything. Maybe not clearly. But the girl the drunk had tried to sell as deaf wasn't. He didn't confront her. Didn't speak it aloud. Instead, he placed a single book on the kitchen table, an old one, spine cracked, pages yellowed. Learning to Sign. He left it there, open to the first page. She didn't touch it. But the next day, she started sweeping the porch in rhythmic patterns. 4 strokes left. 4 strokes right. The pattern matched the first sentence in the book. My name is. She didn't sign it, but she swept it. Silas said nothing, just kept working. And she kept sweeping. The sky turned to copper as the sun sank behind the hills. The girl sat alone at the edge of the corral, tracing something in the dust with her finger. Silas watched from the porch. 3 words, written in slow, careful lines. I can hear. She looked up, not at him, but at the sky. The wind blew past them both. And for the first time, it sounded less like a ghost and more like a promise. Winter didn't arrive in one hard blow, not out here. It bled in slowly, like ink soaking through linen. The days grew shorter, but it was the nights that pressed in hardest, wind curling under doors, frost claiming the corners of window panes like delicate, hostile lace. The air snapped brittle, and everything that lived seemed to move slower, more careful, as if afraid to be caught unprepared. Silas felt the shift in his bones before it showed on the land. Old men always did. He tightened the shutters, stacked more wood than usual, hung an extra lantern near the barn, and fixed the squeaky hinge she hadn't complained about but always flinched from. The girl, he still didn't know her name, had begun to write more often. Not with pen and paper, but in the soil, the dust, the frost that clung to the edges of the porch in morning. Small words, big truths. She wrote them when she thought no one was watching. I remember the music. He lied. I heard everything. I did not cry. Not when he hit me. Not once. Each message was there and gone in a breath. She'd erased them with her heel before the sun got high, but Silas saw every one. She'd begun to sign as well when she thought it safe. Not full sentences, but pieces, half-formed thoughts whispered by the hands. Silas had taken to studying at night. The old book sat open by his chair, dog-eared and ragged. He copied the gestures in silence, tracing them like prayers. She noticed. One morning, as he brought in water from the well, she met him at the door and spelled something slowly in the air. My name is Lark. He stood frozen, the pail in one hand, boots dripping. She didn't smile, just held his gaze like it was something steady she meant to hand over. Lark, like the bird that sings just before dawn breaks open, like something fragile that still dares to rise. He nodded once, then repeated her name in the air, clumsy but careful. That evening, they shared supper without a word, yet somehow the silence felt lighter. He poured her extra stew, and she folded his napkin without being asked. It was small, quiet peace, the kind that most folks are too loud to recognize. But peace is a thing the West doesn't allow to linger. The trouble came 3 days later in the form of hoofbeats too fast for a visit, too heavy for a traveler. Silas looked up from the fence post he was bracing and saw dust rising from the valley like the land itself was warning him. 2 riders, big men, one with a hat full of holes and a rifle strapped across his back like a threat. The other grinned like someone who enjoyed taking what didn't belong to him. Grady Finn. Lark was by the barn gathering kindling. She froze the second she saw them. Not from fear, but something colder. Recognition. Grady didn't dismount, just leaned sideways in the saddle, that grin of his a twisted thing wrapped in whiskey breath and old blood. Well, I'll be, he called, voice like gravel rolling downhill. She's still breathing. Thought you'd have buried her by now. Silas didn't move, just stared back, quiet as dusk. Grady spat. You ought to thank me, Wade. Took her off my hands. Girl's cursed, you know. Ain't right in the head. Heard things she shouldn't. Said things she couldn't be known. Cost me jobs. Nearly got me locked up back in Dry Hollow. Lark's hands had stilled. Her eyes never left Grady. His companion chuckled. Reckon she's old enough now. Might fetch double this time. Silas felt the air narrow around him. It wasn't anger that rose up. It was something older. Something forged in long nights and graveside promises. He stepped once, then again, until he stood between them and the girl. She ain't for sale. Grady's eyes narrowed. Didn't ask, Wade. You're holding property that's legally mine. She's not property. She's if I've got papers, Grady said, reaching into his coat and pulling out a crumpled sheet. Right here. Custodial claim signed by Judge Maddock down in Harper's Point. Silas didn't glance at it. Maddock's been dead 6 months. Grady's grin faltered. She stays, Silas said, voice low. You ride on. The man beside Grady shifted in his saddle. You gonna make us? Silas didn't reach for his rifle. He didn't have to. Lark stepped beside him, one hand raised. Not in fear, not in plea, but speaking. A sign. Just one. Liar. Grady recoiled, as if struck. His mouth opened, but no sound came. Reckon you heard that, Silas said. They left. Not quick, not slow. Just enough to save face, but not enough to show backbone. Grady turned once before cresting the ridge, eyes full of something muddled. Rage, yes. But something close to fear, too. When they were gone, Silas turned to Lark. Her shoulders were trembling, though her face was calm. He knelt, took her hand. Signed slowly. You safe. Always. She didn't answer in kind, but she nodded. That night, she did not sleep in the barn. She sat beside the fireplace, knees hugged to her chest, eyes fixed on the dancing light. Silas poured her warm milk with honey and handed her a blanket. She took both, then reached for the book. Not the signing guide. A journal. His wife's. Silas froze, hand halfway to the shelf. He hadn't touched it in years. But Lark had found it. She opened it gently, the pages dry as leaves. She pointed at a passage, then signed a question. She was kind. He nodded once. Lark placed the journal in his lap. On the next page, she wrote something with a stick of charcoal pulled from a hearth. What would she say if she saw me? Silas looked at the words for a long time, then wrote beneath them. She'd say God gave me a second reason to believe in good. The room went still. Outside, the wind blew soft across the plains. Inside, something shifted. Not loud, not sudden, but real. Lark closed the book and leaned against the wall, her breath slow and even. For the first time since she'd arrived, her eyes closed not from exhaustion, but trust. Silas sat beside her, firelight flickering across both their faces. Not father and daughter. Not strangers. Just two things broken different ways, learning how to be whole again by standing near. And in the distance, far off across the cold hills, a hawk cried into the night. Not mourning, but warning. Snow came like a secret kept too long, soft, then sudden, burying everything in a hush so deep even the coyotes kept quiet. The world turned white overnight. Fence posts vanished under drifts, and the trees bowed low beneath the weight of stillness. Inside the cabin, the hearth burned steady. The room smelled of pine and old wool, bread crust and smoke. Lark sat by the window, her breath fogging the glass. She drew little circles in the condensation, one, then another, then wiped them away before they could melt. She hadn't spoken again since the night she asked about Silas's wife. Not with words, not with her hands. But something had changed in her silence. It was fuller now, not a void but a waiting place. Like a page that knew it would soon be written on. Silas gave her space, but not distance. He moved around her with quiet reverence, never reaching unless she did. He'd begun to leave her little things on the table. An apple with its skin peeled into ribbons, a folded scarf he mended with blue thread, the old tin box full of his wife's hairpins. She never took them while he watched. But by evening, each gift was gone, tucked somewhere only she knew. One morning, before sunrise, she was already outside. Silas stepped onto the porch and saw her tracks, looping wide then narrowing near the barn. He followed the path and found her feeding the mare oats from her palm, her other hand stroking the creature's neck like it was the only thing in the world that had never tried to hurt her. He didn't say a word, just leaned against the doorframe and watched the slow rhythm of trust between them. She turned suddenly, her eyes sharp. then signed. Someone's here. He didn't doubt her. Minutes later, the wind brought it, faint hoofbeats, muffled under snow. Then the shape of a man, weaving through the trees on a chestnut gelding. It wasn't Grady this time. This man was younger, smoother, dressed too fine for country roads, black gloves, city boots. He dismounted with a fluid ease that told Silas he'd done it often but never here. "Morning," he called, voice warm as cider, but slick with something else. Silas didn't answer. "I'm looking for a girl. Deaf. Might be called Lark. Word is she's been spotted out this way." Silas took a slow step forward. "Who sent you?" The man smiled like he was used to smiling at folks right before he sold them bad land. "Judge Harper. Dry Hollow Circuit Court. We got reason to believe the girl was taken without consent." "She was sold," Silas said, voice low. The man tipped his head. "And now she's being recalled. There's a bounty if you're curious. She's not a stray horse. She's a ward of the county. She's a child." The man's jaw twitched. He reached into his coat and pulled out a paper, waxy, official, stamped and signed in ink too new to trust. He held it out like a rope he expected Silas to grab. Lark stepped from behind the barn then. Silas started to move toward her, but she held up her hand. She came forward slowly, her face unreadable. The man looked at her like one might study a coin, interested, but only if it was rare. He crouched slightly, condescending. "There you are, sweetheart. We're going to take you someplace proper. Warm food, safe beds. No more barns." Lark didn't blink. She signed. One word. "Liar." The man's smile flickered. "She understands more than you think," Silas said. The man straightened, his charm vanishing like breath in winter. "Doesn't matter. I got legal claim." "No, you've got a forged signature from a drunk who tried to sell his daughter to a brothel last year." That stopped him cold. "She told me," Silas said, "in her way." The man glanced at Lark as if reconsidering how much of a threat she might be. Then back to Silas. "You think you can keep her hidden out here forever? Spring comes, so do the lawmen. And they don't ask so polite. Then they'd best be ready to leave the same way they came." The man scowled, but he was smart enough to see the line he shouldn't cross. He turned, mounted his horse with a snap of leather, and rode off without another word. Silas waited until the hoofbeats vanished into wind, then turned to Lark. Her arms were wrapped around herself, eyes distant. He walked toward her, slow as smoke. She didn't run. He signed carefully. "You want to go?" She looked up, startled. "If you want to leave, I'll take you. Anywhere. You choose." Her breath caught. Then she shook her head. "Firm. Here. I stay." For a long time, neither moved. The snow swirled around them like they were statues, lost in a story someone else was still writing. That night, she brought the journal to the fire again. But instead of writing questions, she opened to a blank page and placed it in front of him, then held out the charcoal. He took it, hands trembling. He didn't write much. Just a line. "A truth. I was lonely before you. I didn't know how much until you stayed." She read it, then reached for his hand. Not to hold, not to pull. Just to trace the lines of his palm, like a map she meant to memorize. They sat like that a long time. Outside, the wind howled, but it could not touch the warmth inside those walls. In the dark, she signed one last word before sleep took her. Home. And still, the story wasn't over. Because some men don't ride away when they lose. Some men circle back, teeth bared, looking to take what they think they're owed. And Grady Finn was not done circling. They came on the third day of thaw. Snowmelt dripped like secrets from the cabin's eaves, and the land was soft beneath the boots, mud swallowing footsteps like it meant to keep them. The trees, stripped of snow, stood tall but still, as if bracing for something even the wind hadn't whispered yet. Lark was the first to feel it again. That tension in the marrow, like something old and cruel, was stirring just beyond the edge of sight. She paused while brushing the mare, her hand hovering in midair. Silas was splitting firewood out back when he heard the barn door creak open, then her boots on the porch, light but swift. She appeared in the frame like a ghost with purpose, breath short, eyes already warning. Silas dropped the axe. The first rider came into view minutes later. Then two more. Then four. Grady rode in the center, his posture easy, like the land owed him still. A deep green coat hung from his shoulders, too fine for any honest rancher, but his face was hard now, thinned by spite and cold seasons. The The same lawman from before was beside him, smug as a vulture. Behind them, 2 more riders, faces hidden beneath scarves, guns slung like tools, not warnings. Silas stepped down from a porch, calm in a way that felt heavy. He didn't carry a rifle. Didn't need to. He had something else behind him now. Grady didn't speak right away. He dismounted, brushing mud from his gloves like a man about to attend church rather than burn it down. "I figured you'd be stubborn," he said at last. "But this? Hiding stolen property, defying court orders, harboring a child." "She's not property," Silas said, "and that paper's as fake as your intentions." The lawman stepped forward. "We got witnesses say she was sold proper. Witnesses say she belongs to Harper's custody now." "Witnesses paid in whiskey," Silas replied. "Ask her. If she wants to go, she can, but you won't take her." Lark stood behind the screen door, unmoving. Grady's eyes flicked toward her, slow and lecherous, like a man remembering something he never should have touched. "She's deaf," the lawman said too quickly. "Can't testify for herself." Silas smiled faintly. "Then watch closely." He turned and nodded to Lark. She stepped forward, calm as ever, and raised her hands. But instead of her usual signing, she brought her palms together, fingers interlaced, and bowed her head. A moment of stillness. Then she began. She didn't sign. She spoke. Her voice was low and cracked from disuse, like river stones grinding together after a long drought. But it was steady. "I was sold. Yes. But not by someone who cared. Not by someone who saw me as anything but a burden. This man," she gestured to Silas, voice catching. "He never touched me. Never shouted. Never lied. He gave me silence, then taught me how to fill it. I am not going anywhere." Silas swallowed once, then twice. Even the horses had gone still. Grady's eyes burned with disbelief. "You been talking this whole time?" Lark met his gaze. "I was listening." That did it. Grady's face twisted, and his hand reached for his coat. The others twitched, unsure if this was still legal business or something darker. But Silas moved first. Not toward his rifle. Not toward Grady. He stepped in front of Lark. No words. Just his body, a wall of quiet defiance. Grady hesitated, and in that breath of indecision, something unexpected happened. The mare in the barn whinnied sharply, rearing once. Behind the riders, a low whistle rose from the hills. More horses. Neighbors. Silas hadn't called them, but someone had. A creak of wagon wheels followed, then the unmistakable sound of old iron being cocked. 5, maybe 6 men emerged from the trees, ranchers, field hands, a preacher's son with a shotgun too big for his frame. They didn't speak, but their presence cracked through the illusion that Grady still held any control here. Lark stepped from behind Silas now. She held nothing but herself, wrapped in the same patched shawl she'd worn since winter. She walked toward Grady until they were just 4 paces apart. "You sold me like I was meat," she said, "but I am not yours to break." Grady's fingers twitched around the pistol at his side. The lawman touched his arm. "Not here. Not now." But Grady shook him off. "I made you," he hissed. "No," she said gently. "You buried me. He dug me out." Grady's hand jerked. A shot rang out. But wasn't Grady's gun. One of the ranchers, Silas thought his name was Boone, had fired a warning round into the sky. The sound echoed across the hills like thunder made of iron and old oaths. Grady flinched. His eyes darted. The lawman muttered a curse under his breath and took a step back. "You'll regret this," Grady said. But it was a whisper now, more to himself than anyone else. "Maybe," Silas said, voice soft, "but not tonight." And with that, the riders turned. One by one. Grady lingered, glancing back at Lark like a man watching a door close for good. Then he kicked his horse and disappeared into the thawing woods. Silence returned, not as fear, but as peace. The neighbors tipped their hats, said nothing, and vanished into the trees as quietly as they came. Inside the cabin, Lark sat by the fire, legs folded beneath her. Silas handed her a tin mug of tea and sat across from her. He didn't speak, afraid the wrong word might break the moment. But she looked at him with something gentler than gratitude. She opened the journal again. Wrote only 4 words. "I heard your heart." He stared at the words, then reached for the charcoal and added his own. "And mine learned to speak." The fire popped softly between them. Outside, the thaw ran like veins across the earth, opening the land to something new. She turned the page. Blank. Ready. And so were they. If this story found a quiet place in you, stay a while. Tell us where you're watching from. Share your favorite moment. And if it moved you just a little, go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe. Because somewhere out there, someone else needs to hear stories like this too.